Um, Picture this for a second. You are sitting in a crowded, open-plan office.
Oh, yeah, we all know that feeling.
Right. There's this constant hum of conversation all around you, and your phone is just, well, it's constantly buzzing with dozens of group chat notifications.
Yeah, completely overwhelming.
You're scrolling through perfectly curated social media feeds on your lunch break, and your inbox is just completely overflowing. By all modern technological metrics, you are profoundly connected.
You couldn't be more plugged in if you tried.
Exactly. Yet sitting right there in the middle of all that noise and constant communication, you feel completely invisible. You feel entirely disconnected from everyone around you.
It's just, it's one of the most jarring paradoxes of modern life, really. You are physically surrounded by people, completely accessible at all times, and yet experiencing this deep, silent void of isolation.
And that is the exact tension we are diving into today. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a truly fascinating stack of texts we've gathered.
Yeah, some incredible source material today.
We're specifically looking at the alchemy of solitude, the architecture of loneliness, and the biological architecture of loneliness. We are going to decode this hidden epidemic.
Which is so needed right now.
Right. And the goal here is to figure out how to take loneliness, which is incredibly painful, and actually transform it into a profound source of inner strength and authentic connection. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin to understand the mechanics of what is happening when we feel that way in a crowded room?
Well, we have to start by establishing a fundamental baseline. It's a distinction that runs through all the research we're looking at today. We need to completely separate the idea of being alone from the concept of feeling lonely.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, being alone is merely a physical, objective state. It is simply the literal absence of people in your immediate physical vicinity.
Like just being solo in an empty room.
Right, exactly. It is entirely neutral. In fact, under the right circumstances, being alone can be deeply peaceful and, restorative.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I crave being alone.
We all do. But feeling lonely is an emotional, subjective experience. It's the gap, the painful discrepancy, really, between the quality of connection you deeply desire and the connection you actually feel in your life.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's about a deficit of meaning, not a deficit of people.
Precisely.
Like you can be completely alone in a cabin in the woods for a weekend and feel totally whole and connected to yourself. Or, I mean, you can be at a massive dinner party, elbow to elbow with 100 people and feel like you are stranded on a deserted island.
That is exactly it. The deserted island is entirely internal. And to understand how to bridge that gap and overcome that feeling, we first have to look under the hood at what loneliness is actually doing to our bodies and why it hurts so intensely.
Because it really does physically hurt sometimes.
It does. This isn't just a fleeting mood or like a personality quirk. The neuroscience here is absolutely fascinating. The human brain is biologically wired for connection right from infancy.
Like from the moment we're born.
Yes. Our nervous systems literally develop and regulate themselves through attachment and emotional attunement with caregivers. So when meaningful connection is chronically absent, the brain doesn't just feel a little bit sad.
What does it do?
It perceives that absence as an actual, literal survival threat.
Let's dig into that survival threat aspect for a second. Because evolutionary speaking, we don't have sharp claws, we aren't particularly fast, and we don't have thick armor.
No, we're pretty defenseless in the wild.
Right. So our evolutionary superpower was the collective. If you were separated from the tribe on the savannah, you're probably going to freeze or be eaten by something.
That is the exact mechanism at play here. The brain has not updated its software to realize we live in secure, climate-controlled apartments now.
That's wild to think about.
It is. When you feel disconnected, your primal brain sounds the alarm. And brain imaging studies have revealed something remarkable about how this alarm works.
Oh, in the biological architecture of loneliness, right?
Yes, exactly. The studies show that social rejection and isolation activate the exact same neural pathways in the anterior cingulate cortex as physical pain.
Wait. So you're saying the brain literally cannot tell the difference between a broken arm and a broken heart?
That's exactly what I'm saying. The pain centers just light up the exact same way.
The overlap is undeniable then.
Absolutely. The distress of loneliness is not, all in your head in some dismissive, imaginary sense. It is a very real biological response.
Wow.
And because the brain interprets this isolation as a threat to your life, it triggers a massive stress response. It floods the body with cortisol, which is our primary stress hormone, to prepare you for impending danger.
That reframes things completely for me. If loneliness is essentially a biological check engine light that changes how we should react to it.
Right. It's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, just like physical pain tells you to pull your hand away from a hot stove so you don't burn yourself, loneliness is an evolutionary mechanism trying to push you back toward the safety of the tribe.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. It is trying to save your life.
It's an alarm system functioning exactly as it was designed to.
It is. And the research breaks down this alarm system into 3 distinct types of loneliness, which is incredibly helpful.
Because it helps us pinpoint the problem.
Exactly.
Huh.
It allows us to diagnose exactly what kind of connection we are actually lacking. So first, there is emotional loneliness.
Okay, emotional loneliness, what does that entail?
This is the lack of a close, intimately vulnerable connection. It is feeling like no one truly understands your inner world or your deepest thoughts.
So that's the feeling of having, like, a wide circle of casual friends to grab a coffee with, but nobody you can call at 2 a.m. when your life is falling apart and you were just spiraling.
Right, you have the proximity but not the depth.
That makes sense. What's the second type?
Then there is social loneliness, which is almost the inverse.
How so?
That is the lack of a broader community or network. It's feeling like you do not belong to a group, or that you lack a shared purpose or shared experience with the wider society around you.
So you might have a partner you love, but no neighborhood friends or community group.
Exactly. You're missing the village. And finally, there is existential loneliness.
Existential loneliness. How does that differ from the other two? It sounds much broader.
It is. It's the deepest and most subtle form of the 3. Existential loneliness is the feeling of being fundamentally disconnected from life's purpose itself, or, struggling to find your place in the universe.
Like a midlife crisis type of feeling.
Often, yes. We see this hit the hardest during major life transitions, moving to a new city, retiring from a long career, or going through a major breakup.
Because your daily structures just vanish.
Right, and there is a profound sense of untethering. You aren't just missing a person, you are missing a sense of meaning.
But, I mean, if we are biologically hardwired to feel actual physical pain when we are disconnected, and we have all these different complex types of loneliness hitting us from different angles, are we essentially doomed to suffer in our highly individualized modern world?
That's a fair point.
I mean, society isn't exactly built around the communal village model anymore. We are more geographically and socially fractured than ever.
This raises an important question, and it is really the crux of the entire challenge. The answer is no, we are not doomed.
Well, that's a relief.
Because the pain of loneliness is a teacher, not a life sentence. The problem we face today isn't the biological alarm itself. The problem is how we typically respond to that alarm when it goes off.
Because if this biological check engine light is so deeply uncomfortable, I mean, since it literally activates the pain centers of the brain, our most natural human instinct is to just run away from the discomfort.
Exactly. We want to numb it immediately.
Yes, and this is where we enter the avoidance trap.
Right. Modern life offers endless, highly engineered tools to help us avoid being alone with ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
We fill the quiet with constant noise. We fill the empty gaps in our day with screens. We create this elaborate illusion of hyperproductivity, overbooking our schedule so we never have to stop moving.
Basically, we put a piece of tape over the check engine light by endlessly doom-scrolling social media, and we just pretend the engine isn't smoking.
That's a perfect analogy.
But what is it about the silence that is so terrifying to us? What are we actually running from?
We are terrified of the questions that might emerge if we let the noise settle.
Like what kind of questions?
If we sit in the silence, we are forced to confront the deeper insecurities we usually drown out. We avoid the quiet because we do not want to hear the internal voice asking, am I enough? Am I fundamentally unlovable? Does my life actually matter?
Ugh. And confronting those questions head on is exhausting.
Yeah.
So we just, pick up the phone again.
We do, but that avoidance creates a highly dangerous biological feedback loop.
How does that loop work?
Well, chronic ignored loneliness actually pushes the brain into a prolonged state of hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance?
Yeah, because your brain thinks you are separated from the tribe and therefore in mortal danger, you start actively scanning your environment for threats.
So you're constantly on edge.
Yes. And because you feel socially unsafe, you start anticipating rejection everywhere. You begin misinterpreting completely neutral social interactions as direct attacks.
I want to break down what that hypervigilance actually looks like, say, on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, let's do it.
If your body is flooded with cortisol, your heart rate is probably elevated, your breathing is shallow. So if a coworker takes 2 hours to reply to a mundane email, your hypervigilant brain immediately skips logic.
Right, it skips right past, they're just busy.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
goes straight to, they hate me, I am going to be fired, I am totally isolated.
That is the exact mechanism. Your threat detection system is completely broken. And because you misinterpret that email as a threat, you withdraw further to protect yourself.
Like you act coldly to the coworker the next day.
Exactly. And that withdrawal makes you even more isolated, which triggers more cortisol, which makes you more hypervigilant.
It's a total self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is. And the physical toll of this loop is staggering. Ignored loneliness isn't just an emotional burden. It leads to chronic fatigue, severe sleep disruption, and a heavy, tense, inflammatory feeling in the physical body.
And I imagine over time, if you're stuck in that loop long enough, it stops being a temporary feeling and becomes a core part of who you are.
That is the ultimate danger discussed in The Architecture of Loneliness. There is a fundamental shift in identity.
A shift in identity.
Yeah, you stop seeing yourself as someone who is temporarily experiencing loneliness due to circumstance, and you start seeing yourself as someone who is alone. It becomes an inherent personality trait.
Wow. And the tragic irony is that because of this hypervigilance, we start flinching before anyone even throws a punch.
That's exactly what happened.
We push potential friends or partners away because our nervous system is so absolutely convinced they're going to leave us anyway.
Which is why simply ignoring loneliness or trying to outwork it simply does not work. You cannot outrun a biological imperative.
The body keeps the score.
Exactly. Those suppressed emotions do not just evaporate into the ether, they metabolize. They reemerge as deep resentment, burnout, or complete emotional shutdown.
So how do we fix it?
Healing has to begin by doing the exact opposite of our instincts. We have to meet the loneliness, not run from it.
Which means if running away and distracting ourselves is what creates this terrible hypervigilant loop in the first place, the only way out is to stop running.
We have to stop running.
We have to turn around, take the tape off the check engine light, and actually face the silence.
That is the critical pivot. We have to shift from operating out of fear to building what the sources call the sanctuary of solitude.
The sanctuary of solitude. I like that.
It's a great concept. And the very first step in that architectural rebuild is reframing how we view aloneness. The hypervigilant mind exaggerates the danger, telling you that being alone means you are abandoned, definitive, or unlovable.
Right. It pathologizes it.
Yes, but we have to recognize that aloneness is an entirely neutral condition. It is not an identity. It is not a punishment for failing at social life.
This goes right back to the distinction we made at the start. It is the profound difference between loneliness, which is a painful feeling of lack and emptiness and solitude.
Exactly.
Because solitude isn't just not being around people. It is a state of active presence and intentionality.
Yes, solitude is a cultivated skill. There is a beautiful piece of wisdom from the poet Rumi that perfectly captures this shift. The quieter you become, the more you are able to hear.
Oh, that's incredibly powerful.
Isn't it? Solitude is not about isolating yourself from the world. It is about establishing a secure and nurturing inner foundation so you aren't terrified of your own company.
And how do we do that?
Well, you build that inner safety through some very specific, intentional practices.
Let's get into the mechanics of that, because building inner safety sounds great in theory, but how do we actually do that when our brain is screaming that we are in danger?
One of the most effective methods mentioned in the texts is engaging in inner child work.
Okay, I know that phrase can sometimes sound a bit abstract to people.
Sure, it can sound a bit out there, but the psychology behind it is very solid. It involves consciously imagining speaking to your younger self with deep empathy and reassurance.
Like visualizing yourself as a kid.
Exactly. When the inner critic flares up and says you are unworthy or isolated, you pause. And you deliberately respond to yourself with the same extreme kindness and patience you would offer a struggling 5-year-old.
So it's essentially a practice of cognitive reappraisal.
That's the scientific term for it, yes.
You are actively interrupting the neural pathways of self-criticism, which usually just run on autopilot, and you're forcing the brain to practice self-compassion instead.
Exactly. You are rewiring the default mode network of your brain. You are becoming your own secure attachment figure.
That makes a lot of sense.
And there are very practical micro steps to begin this process. Things you can do right now.
Like what?
Taking a 10 to 15-minute walk, but crucially, without your headphones.
Oh, no podcasts.
No podcasts, no music, no audiobooks. Just you, your thoughts, and the physical environment. Engaging in a deliberate digital detox for a few hours. Or journaling without any filter or self-censorship. just letting the thoughts flow onto the paper to get them out of your head.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Mhm.
Historically, if you look at some of the greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators, they didn't just tolerate this kind of silence. They actively sought it out.
They craved it.
Yeah. This exact type of solitude was the birthplace of immense creativity and clarity for them.
Mm.
It is where they figured out what they actually believed, separate from the noise of society.
It's where the best ideas come from.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for you listening out there. Sitting completely alone in a quiet room without my phone to distract me sounds terrifying if I've been avoiding it for years.
It absolutely is terrifying at first.
What happens when I try this and the anxiety totally spikes? What if I just feel exponentially worse?
That is an incredibly common and valid fear. And the most important thing to realize is that experiencing discomfort at first is not a failure.
Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong.
Not at all. It does not mean you are doing it wrong. The discomfort is simply awareness. You are finally meeting parts of your psyche that have been waiting years for your attention.
The engine is finally getting a chance to tell you what's wrong.
Exactly. The sudden spike in anxiety is just your nervous system reacting to unfamiliar territory. It's used to constant stimulation.
So when you take that away,
When you remove the stimulation, the brain panics for a moment. But with time and repetition, the nervous system slowly learns that stillness does not equal danger. It is a process of conditioning your body to realize that it is safe in its own company.
so you just have to sit through that initial friction. You have to let the anxiety peak and then naturally subside, proving to your brain that the silence isn't going to kill you.
That is the work. And as that inner safety increases, aloneness transforms. It becomes a choice rather than a threat.
Which changes everything.
It changes everything about how you interact with others. You stop seeking connection out of sheer desperation to numb your own anxiety, and you start seeking it from a place of wholeness.
Which brings us to the next massive phase of this journey. Once we have built this inner fortress, once we have trained our nervous system to tolerate and maybe even genuinely enjoy our own company, how do we step back out into the world?
Because we do still need people.
Right. How do we connect without falling back into superficial, draining interactions?
This is the architecture of authentic connection. And it requires recognizing that deep, sustaining adult friendships require two critical ingredients that are often missing in modern life:
Which are?
vulnerability and consistency.
Vulnerability seems especially tough here. If you've been stuck in that hypervigilant state we talked about, constantly scanning for threats and rejection, dropping your guard is the absolute last thing your brain wants to do.
It is incredibly difficult, but vulnerability is the absolute gateway to real connection because it is the only thing that invites genuine reciprocity.
You have to go first, basically.
Yes. When you finally drop the curated mask and share a real fear or a genuine hope with someone, it acts as a signal. It gives the other person permission to drop their mask, too.
That's beautiful.
Authentic connection is strictly about quality over quantity. It is not about accumulating a massive network of acquaintances. It is about having a few relationships where you are entirely, truly seen for who you are.
And beyond just individual friendships, there is another incredibly powerful tool in the sources we need to talk about. It's this concept from Chapter 7 called the altruism antidote.
Yes, this is a phenomenal evidence-based concept. The research shows that one of the absolute fastest, most effective ways to heal chronic loneliness is through purposeful service and volunteering.
Which, on the surface, sounds entirely counterintuitive.
Well, it does.
If I am deeply lonely, emotionally exhausted, and feeling totally depleted, the idea of going out and working for free for someone else sounds like the last thing I need. I mean, I need people to care for me.
Right, I feel like your cup is empty.
Exactly. But the science of giving completely flips that assumption on its head.
It does, and it is entirely grounded in biology. Serving others forcefully shifts your focus outward. It breaks that internal, hypervigilant loop of self-doubt and self-monitoring.
You stop obsessing over your own flaws.
Exactly. It reinforces human interdependence, the undeniable physical fact that we are part of a larger network and that our actions matter to others. And, crucially, the act of giving releases a powerful cocktail of neurochemicals in the brain.
We're talking about oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins, right?
Exactly. When you engage in altruism, Your brain releases oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone.
which chemically promotes feelings of trust.
Yes, trust and connection.
Hmm.
You also get a dopamine hit, which is the brain's reward system. It fundamentally improves your mood, reduces the inflammatory stress of cortisol, and creates a biological sense of belonging.
And it doesn't even require grand, heroic gestures. We aren't saying you need to quit your job and build houses full time.
No, not at all.
It can be small, consistent acts of service. Listening intently to a neighbor who is struggling, mentoring someone in your field online, or just volunteering a few hours a month.
Mm-hmm.
Those small acts compound over time to rebuild a profound sense of purpose.
They absolutely do.
So what does this all mean for you? If you are listening to this right now, maybe on your commute or while doing the dishes and trying to map this complex biology onto your own life, I think it helps to look at it like breathing.
I love this analogy.
Solitude is the inhale. It is where you step back from the demands of the world, gather your strength, process your complicated emotions, and figure out who you actually are when nobody else is watching or judging.
It's the recharge.
Right. But connection and service, that is the exhale. That is where you take that grounded strength you built in the quiet and you share it with the world. You cannot just do one.
No, you'd be totally unbalanced.
If you only inhale and isolate yourself completely, you suffocate.
Yeah.
If you only exhale, constantly pouring yourself out for others without ever recharging, you empty out completely and burn out. You need the rhythm of both.
If we connect this to the bigger picture mastering, that rhythm is the very definition of living an empowered life.
Empowered because you're in control.
Exactly. True empowerment means that the fear of loneliness no longer dictates your choices. You are no longer clinging to toxic or unfulfilling relationships just to avoid facing a Friday night alone.
Or overworking just to avoid the silence of your own home.
Right. You connect from a place of wholeness, not desperation.
You are choosing to be with people because you genuinely want them in your life, not because you need them to serve as a distraction from yourself.
Precisely. You learn to honor the ebb and flow. You find genuine peace in your own company. And because of that peace, you are able to engage with the world with genuine presence and generosity.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It is. Through this process, loneliness completely transforms. It stops being an enemy you have to fight, and it becomes a guide.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the incredible journey we have just gone on.
Mm.
We started by dismantling the shame around this issue. We realized that feeling lonely isn't a personal failure or a character flaw.
Not at all.
It is a vital biological signal, a literal check engine light operating through the brain's pain matrix, telling you that you need connection just as much as you need food or water.
It's keeping you alive.
But instead of running from that uncomfortable feeling, numbing it with screens, and getting caught in a hypervigilant, cortisol-fueled loop of anxiety, we can make a different choice. We can pivot.
We can choose to lean into the discomfort and actually listen to the alarm.
Yes, by leaning in, by practicing radical self-compassion, doing the hard inner child work to rewrite our neural pathways, and building a sanctuary of solitude, we learn to feel completely safe with ourselves.
And once we are safe in our own minds, we can step out.
We step out and utilize the altruism antidote. We can engage in purposeful service and build vulnerable, authentic friendships. That is how we transform our deepest isolation into profound empowerment.
It really is a complete architectural rebuild of how we relate to ourselves and, by extension, how we relate to society.
It is a totally new foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Loneliness is just a messenger. It is a teacher holding up a mirror, showing us not what we lack, but what we are capable of becoming if we are brave enough to look.
Beautifully said.
So the next time you are sitting in that crowded office or lying in bed scrolling at midnight and that heavy, empty feeling starts to creep into your chest, instead of instinctively reaching for your phone to numb it with a dozen meaningless notifications, what if you paused?
Just take a breath.
What if you took a deep breath, sat in the uncomfortable silence, and asked it, what are you trying to protect me from? And what part of myself am I neglecting right now?
That moment of pause is exactly where the transformation begins.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you take these insights to heart, that you understand the biology of what you are feeling, and more importantly, we hope you truly embrace your next moment of solitude. Until next time.